I'm sorry if I missed any of you. If you can come back and join me on this page, I apologize. I'm on the Valley Beth Shalom page now, I believe. Tonight is Erev Pesach, and it's talking about Bedikat Chametz. So if you could please come and find me there, I would really appreciate it. Um, Tonight, the custom in Jewish families is to go and find um, not really. The custom is to go and find all of these quantities of chametz that are um, that are uh, that are found all over the house. So in the home that I grew up in, we would go and hide 10 different um, quantities of chametz, and then we would end up finding only 8 of them, which either meant that we lost 2 or the dog ate them, and we were never quite sure which one it was. Um, so tonight is that evening of Bedikat Chametz. Now, take a moment and I'll discuss this. And if anyone has questions as you come on, then I would be delighted to answer all of your questions. Um, Tonight, if you have a question, just type it into the comment box on the bottom, and I'll do my very best to try to answer those questions for you. Chametz is actually yeast. Yeast is a microorganism that lives in the air all around us. And yeast likes, most of all in the world, yeast likes sugar. And sugars are released when you take starches like flour and you get them wet. And once you get them wet, those starches uh, release the sugars that are inside of them, and the yeast finds the sugar, and the yeast party on that sugar, and they begin to multiply. I won't explain that if you're an adult. And the release of the multiplication of a yeast cell produces two byproducts. One is carbon dioxide, and one is alcohol. And that's why you end up with beer. If you take barley and you ferment it, the yeast multiplies on the barley and gives you carbon dioxide and beer. And the sugars in the barley produce a thing called malt, and the malt ferments, and you end up with beer. In ancient Egypt was the place where this process was discovered and was perfected. It was discovered and perfected by the ancient Israelites. I'm sorry, the ancient Egyptians. And when the Israelites were in residence in Egypt, they discovered this. They discovered this process and made it part of our culture as well. Because the ancient Egyptians had water and they had grains, and they discovered the magic of yeast. And it is a kind of magic because it's the difference between matzah and challah. Basically, it's that chemical process, that biochemical process, that leads us to be able to ferment and rise bread and cakes and everything else that we use. And that is the biochemistry of chametz. So the Hebrew word chametz means to sour, because what's happening there is that the sugars get consumed in the grain. The sugars get consumed by the yeast molecules, and you end up with a sour taste. And if you do this properly and you have the right kind of yeast, you can end up with a nice San Francisco sourdough. And there are people that cultivate these sours for many, many years until they have the most perfected sour. My father was a baker, and my father perfected his own sourdough rye bread, and that was a sort of deep, dark family secret about how he did it, and where it came from, and how he cultivated over the course of his career as a baker, and that's what gives us chametz. So tonight is the night of ridding the home of chametz. And you go on a search and destroy mission. You have your candle, and you have your spoon, and if I had a feather, I would do that too. And the idea is to go around the house and find all of the remnants of chametz, all the crumbs that are in couch cushions and in shelves and in pockets, and gather it all up. And in tomorrow morning, after the morning service, tomorrow morning you gather this up and you burn it. And there is a special bracha. It's Baruch Atah Melech Asher Kitshanu Mitzvotav Etzivan Al Bir Chametz, on the burning of the chametz. And any chametz that you don't burn, there is a formula that you say, which you declare that any chametz in my possession is not in my possession anymore. I don't own it. I can't see it. It's not there. And if it is there, it doesn't belong to me. It belongs to somebody else. It's hefker. It means it belongs to the world. It no longer belongs to me. And that way, You have now rid your home of chametz, number one, by cleaning it out and making sure you got rid of all of it intentionally. Number two, by searching for it and then burning it. Number three, by declaring it's not yours anymore. And number four, by selling it off to a non-Jewish person who takes possession for the course of of the week of Pesach. And that's the way that we rid ourselves of the chametz. So for those of you who are with me before, I'm sorry about the switch back and forth on the site, but I hope that you found us again. And if anybody has any questions, you're welcome to type them in to the site, to the comment section, and I'd be happy to try and answer all of your questions. Chametz is sour. It's the fermentation of grain. But the Hasidic tradition, the great mystical tradition of Jewish Europe, that begins in the 18th century, in the 18th century, the original Hasidic tradition had a beautiful understanding of this. They understand chametz in its original Hebraic meaning that which is sour, that which is rotten, that which has spoiled, that which is, and they said that what we're trying to do on Pesach is not only to clean up all of the sour in the house, not only to clean up the crumbs and the other materials that are in the house, but to clean out all that has soured within us, all that has soured within our souls, all that has soured within our person. And that's a very beautiful idea, because what we understand then is that Passover is 6 months away from Yom Kippur. I mean, these are the two ends of the world, Jewishly. Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, the high holidays come at the end of the summer, the beginning of the fall and the winter. In Israel, the end of the dry season, the beginning of the wet season. And those holidays of the fall, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and then Sukkot, reflect upon the vulnerability of people as we face the coming wet season, and our prayers and hopes that the season will bring rain and rain will bring prosperity. And Pesach comes at the opposite end of the year, when the wet season is giving way to the dry season, when springtime is becoming, when the warmth of the sunshine is shining again. But both of them have this idea of cleaning out. So on Yom Kippur, we're going to clean out the sins of the soul. We're going to do a careful cheshbon hanefesh, an inventory, a study of the soul, and try to find all that has polluted us and all that has poisoned our best intentions, and try to clean that out and once again become pure as we begin a new year. 6 months later, it's Passover. And now we're going to do the same kind of a thing. As we're searching under couch cushions and behind pillows and in drawers and in pockets, and I used to get my car washed this time of year, once a year, whether it needs it or not. As we're doing all of the searching for the spare candies and crackers and bread and crumbs and half-eaten this and uneaten that finds its way into the corners and crevices of our places, of our domicile, and of our cars and of our possessions, we're also going to be searching the self for all that is rotten, for all that is sour, for all that is polluting us, for all that is stealing away our joy, for all that is stealing away our optimism, for all that is taking away a sense that life can be a blessing. And that is really the opportunity that Pesach offers. So I don't want you just to be doing this physically. Physically, it's just fine as well. But I'd like you to try to do this spiritually as well, which is to take some time during the course of this week, the course of today and tomorrow, and then, of course, during the week of Pesach as well, and try to free yourself from the slavery that we all experience, slavery to the grudges that we left behind, to the insults, slavery to the sense of failure that dogs us, slavery to the unfulfilled dreams and unfulfilled promises, and to try to start all over again. Because to carry around those grudges, to carry around that anger, to carry around that pain is not going to help us. It's not going to free us for the coming year, for the coming season. And that really is the freedom that comes with Passover. Now, tomorrow night, we're going to sit down at the Seder and take a word about that as well. And again, if anybody has questions, I have a panel here, I'm told, that I can see questions, and I can't see any at the moment. So if you've written them, you can write them. If you can't get them onto this panel, you're welcome to email them to me or text me, and I'd be happy to look them up as we're going forward. Um, Tomorrow night is a Seder. And of course, I don't have to tell you that this year is a Pesach like no other. This is a very strange Pesach because Pesach is traditionally a gathering for families. It's a time for bringing us all together, from gathering us from the various places that life has brought us and sitting us down at the table. And as much as we tell the story of the Passover of Egypt, it's also a time to tell the story of the families that we belong to and we love. And it's a time to gather around and listen to the fortunes of our friends and our family and those that we love. But this year it's going to be very difficult to do that because the quarantine, the social isolation that has been enforced upon us, and we're going to be trying to do this through Zoom calls and through conferencing, these technical technologies of connection and of social conferencing. And I think that's in some ways, this could be an advantage. My brother's going to be on a call with me. My brother lives in Palo Alto. My other brother lives in Boston. And we're going to be on the same Seder call. So we're going to be able to enjoy each other. Haven't seen each other for quite some time. But it's going to be hard not to be able to reach across the table and share a word of laughter, share a word of connection, a word of intimacy, even share a word of argument. I'm going to miss having an argument because if we get into an argument, we can mute each other, and I suppose that's an invention that only my ancestors would have appreciated. Um, so I think we have to remember what the Seder is really for. The purpose of a Seder is to tell a story. It's a story that is 3,500 years old, and if you think about how remarkable that is, there is nothing in the world which is the same as it was 3,500 years ago. Absolutely nothing. We eat different food. We speak in different languages. We have different assumptions and different understandings about how the world is put together. We have different understandings about who we are in the world, about what motivates us. We see the world in completely different ways than our ancestors. Heck, you don't have to go 3,500 years, even 30 years ago. I mentioned to my kid that I had a typewriter and a phonograph in my dorm room when I was in college, and he didn't know what either one of those things were. The world has changed so quickly in the last generation, much less 3,500 years, and yet we are telling the same story. Now, why are we telling the same story? We are telling the same story because there is something that doesn't change. And what doesn't change in the course of these 3,500 years is the human condition. And the human condition, as we understand it from the Seder, the human condition is a yearning for freedom and a resentment, a contempt for injustice. And that really is the soul of the Seder. If you can go a little bit deeper, the human condition in its biological sense is a tragedy because human life is limited, because we're finite, because no one has an endless number of tomorrows, because all of us know that the people we love and the projects they were engaged in will all come to an end. Each one of us knows that. And yet, here is a story that says there is still hope. Because we crossed the Red Sea and we encountered a God in the course of that crossing of the Red Sea, there is hope. There is hope that justice will one day conquer injustice. There is hope that freedom will one day reign for those who are constrained in bondage. There is hope that under all the circumstances of the tragedies of human existence, we might yet one day find some sort of redemption, some way of believing that our lives are still meaningful, still powerful, still important, even given the mortality of human beings. And that really is the great joy of Passover. I'm going to suggest a couple simple things I think that make Passovers very kind of wonderful. Number one, when you begin the Seder, begin with a time limit. I have a wonderful brother-in-law who I love a lot, who always got very antsy at the Seder table. So what I discovered is that the thing that made him so very antsy, was the fact that he didn't know when this was going to end or if it was going to end. So I discovered the easiest thing to do is to just tell him that we'll do 40 minutes and then we'll stop. And I got a kitchen timer one day and just sort of set it. And when it dinged, he ate dinner and he was much happier. And especially if you're doing this over Zoom, you can only do it for about 30, 35, 40 minutes. So that's my suggestion number one. Suggestion number two is as you're going through the Seder, stop at each point and see if you can ask a more personal question about this. Karpas in the beginning of the Seder is a green vegetable, which recognizes that springtime is coming. So go around the table and ask everybody at the table to share one new thing that has come into life this year. One new thing since last Pesach. And ask everyone to offer why that was a blessing. What did you learn from that new event? How does that change you? When you get to the four questions, ask everyone if they have other questions. In fact, at our Seder, we had a policy that anyone who had a question anytime during the Seder could stop the Seder and ask a question. And that was a wonderful thing. Anyone could ask a question. Anyone could stop the Seder and pose a problem. And we would stop and we would talk about these things and we would answer all these questions. And if you don't get to the end of the Seder, so you don't get to the end of the Seder. The important part is to have the discussion and to have the discussion in the language of the people who sit in front of you. So the most important thing in the Seder is the line that occurs in the middle of the Haggadah. It's a line taken from the 10th chapter of Pesach, Pesachim, which is the Passover law of the Talmud, which is Bechol dor vador chayav adam lirot et atzmo kilu yatzav Mitzrayim. In every generation, every one of us sees himself and herself as if we came out of Egypt personally. So if you ask a Jewish person, what's your biography? You don't start with my high school education or my parents. You start by saying I was a slave in the land of Egypt. And if you really want to understand who I am, you've got to understand that fact about me, that I was a slave. And that because I was a slave, I see the world with very distinctive eyes. I see the world very differently. I see the world in a way that other people might not see the world. Over and over again, the Bible will tell us that the ethics that we hold are given to us not only because they're right, and not only because they're socially efficient, but the ethics that form the foundation of a Jewish social ethic are given to us. Why? Because I was a slave in the land of Egypt. Now, I have a particular interpretation of this. That woman came to see me once in my office with her maid. You know, almost everybody out here has a maid. And many of these women maids come from Latin American countries. Some are documented, some are not. But they work in our homes, and they help us raise our kids, and they become part of our families. And this particular woman became part of a Jewish family. And she came to me and she sat down with great reverence because they look at me like, you know, most of them are Catholic and they look at me like the Pope. And she says in a combination of Spanish and English, and my Spanish is about that good, she says, Señor Rabino, I have a cousin who came up from, I think it was Salvador, and is working for a Jewish family, and she's working now 2 months, and she hasn't gotten paid. And she came here because she wanted to support her children that are back at El Salvador, living with her mother, and she needs to send the money back, but the family hasn't paid her. And this woman looks at me, this Latin American woman, and she says, Señor Rabino, I am now with a Jewish family 5 years, and I know Hebreos. And Hebreos, she says, tienen corazón. Hebreos have heart. Hebreos don't do this to their help. Hebreos don't treat people like this. Señor Rabino, you got to do something. And here I am, the rabbi of the synagogue, and I'm embarrassed in front of this woman. I'm embarrassed because she likes us. She knows us. She feels for us in the way that we would most want to be exposed to the world. Tienen corazón. Jews have heart. And she says to me, there's a Jewish family that's abusing their maid. I got so angry. I picked up the phone and called the guy. Now, not a member of our shul, so we're safe. But you know, if you have a title in front of your name, you can get through secretaries pretty quickly. And I got to the guy in his office, and I said, listen, you don't know me, but I know something about you. You have someone working for you, not paying them. Take care of it. Guy apologized. Woman got paid, left that family, went to work for another family. stayed for a long time, did very well. Hebreos tienen corazón. Now, here's the point of the story. Why wasn't she paid? Because in the life of that family, she was invisible. We have the power to render human beings invisible, socially invisible. The Latin American maid in that family, socially invisible. When she claimed it was time for you to pay me, no one saw her, no one heard her voice, voiceless. There's some wonderful movies that I think are good preparation for Pesach. There's a movie that came out a couple years ago called The Help. It's with a wonderful story about African American maids, housekeepers in the South in the 1960s. And what you realize is that they're invisible. No one sees them. They raise the kids, they cook the meals, they clean the house, they take care of everything. But to the white folks of that community, those people were invisible. The movie Hidden Figures, about the mathematicians who prepared the way, the trajectories for the John Glenn space shot in the 1960s, they were African American and they were invisible. They were women and they were invisible. What the Jewish tradition teaches us from this Pesach story is that because you were a slave in the land of Egypt, you possess empathy. And because you possess empathy, you are never to relegate another human being to social invisibility. Because you were invisible in the land of Egypt, because you know what it feels like to be relegated to social invisibility. You're never permitted to do that to anyone else. And that is the deepest social, ethical lesson of the Haggadah. The ethical lesson that we are a people tasked with the sacred obligation to recognize the godliness of every human being and the worth of every human being. Because we were slaves. We were the lowest of the low. We were the invisible ones. And we were made visible by a God who came and redeemed us. That's lesson number one. And for that reason, historical experience must become personal memory, because it becomes the foundation of an ethic of empathy. The second lesson has to do with crossing the Red Sea. As I said a moment ago, it had to do with hope. We are a people of hope. We saw the sea split. We understand that even though the world may be burdened with injustice, that even though the world may be burdened with cruelty, and even though the world may be weighed down with evil, that it is possible to bring justice out of injustice. It is possible to bring a social order out of the chaos of human evil. It is possible to cross the sea and to sing a song on the other side. And that is a great gift. That is a great gift of the Pesach. And that's why in the middle of the Seder, before we have supper, we sing everyone's favorite song, which is Dayenu. Dayenu. And what Dayenu says is, look at each miracle. Look at each miracle of the story, and look at each miracle of your own life. And today, as we all worry about what's outside, at the progress of this terrible pandemic, today as we worry about friends who are sick and struggling for life and for health, today as we worry about an economy that we don't know where it's going to go tomorrow and how we're going to sustain ourselves and sustain the parts of our lives that are important to us, I think it's terribly important to push back the despair that comes with that uncertainty with a note of gratitude. Gratitude is the only power stronger than fear in the world. Because when I can't see a certain tomorrow, I can look back and see a certain yesterday. And I can recognize the miracles, the blessings, the gifts that have come my way yesterday. And Dayenu is that prayer. So as you're singing Dayenu, when you finish some of the verses in the book, then imagine your own Dayenu. What is your Dayenu this year? What is the gift, the miracle, the blessing that you'll be saying thank you for this year? What is the gift that has raised you up and uplifted you in the course of this year? A gift of gratitude that you would like to hold on to. And then one last suggestion, which is after supper, there's the second half of the Seder. And the second half of the Seder is all about gratitude. It's all about dreams. The first half of the Seder is about Pesach Sha'avar, the Pesach that was. The second half of the Seder is about Pesach La'atid, the Pesach that will be. It's a dream. And it's a wonderful thing to ask people to share their dreams. If you have teenagers coming to the table, ask them to bring song lyrics that recognize our dreams for a different world. Ask the kids for their own sense of the world they would like to live in, the blessings that they would like to bring to the world, the changes, the revolutions that they would like to engineer in the world. So you start with Manish Tanakh questions and you end with dreams of tomorrow. And in that way you involve young people in the course of the Seder. That's how Pesach is made personal. And that's our task tomorrow night, is to make this personal, this Seder very, very personal. I want to wish you and your family a healthy and a happy and a safe Passover. A couple of announcements before we conclude. Tomorrow morning at 7:30 a.m., VBS Morning Minyan is the Siyum for Firstborn. It is an old tradition that the firstborn in every family fast on the day before Passover in solidarity with the firstborn of Egypt who were destroyed that we might be free. But that's an easy fast. That means to say that if there's somebody who is studying Torah and finishes a section of Torah, then in celebration of that Torah being finished, we can all have a meal in celebration. So we will have that tomorrow morning. The service begins at 7:30. At approximately 8 or 8:05, I'll be doing a little bit of teaching of Torah, and then we'll all have a nosh together in our own kitchens, of course. Tomorrow evening, Valley Beth Shalom will be posting 3 different Seders. You can go online, go to vbs.org, click on the Passover page, and you'll see the links for 3 different Seders. The first one is for families with young children, the second with families for elementary school kids, and the third for adults. 6:30 p.m. I'll be doing the third Seder for adults. If you are an adult or have a friend who is an adult and would like to join the Seder but can't get online for some reason, you can call in. It works on the telephone. Remember telephones? It works on the telephone. Here's the number. I'll repeat it twice. It's 1-669-900-6833. That's 1-669-900-6833. And the meeting code is 893-951-077. The meeting code is 893-951-077. Hit the pound sign, and you'll be at our Seder table. We'll be leading a Seder online. We want everyone to be able to hear the words of the Seder, to feel the hope and the strength and the faith of the Seder, and to share a sweet and a happy Pesach. Thank you for being with me tonight. Now go clean up all the chametz in your house. Take good care. Hag Sameach.